Good morning, everybody. I am Vino Duraisamy. I'm a developer advocate at Snowflake. And firstly, thanks for tuning in. This is going to be a fantastic episode today. We are going to talk about all things DBT projects. And as you know, DBT projects was announced, or it even was in product preview at the time, a few months ago. But today, is not about the feature itself, but how can you take the DBT projects and go and productionize it? How do you operationalize DBT projects if you're already working with them? And really all things getting it to work in a production setting. And to really help you with the best practices and how to go about it, I have with me today Jeremiah Hansen and Uche, who are going to really talk about, firstly, what exactly is DBT projects and how can you get your DBT projects to work in production and at scale? Welcome, Jeremiah and Uche.
What's up?
Thank you. Yeah, hi.
I'm super excited. And I hear somebody say that Jeremiah has a cool demo to show us and how to use DBT projects and really productionize them. And so I'll hand it over to you, Jeremiah. Take over.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Super excited to be with you. I'm on our field CTO team at Snowflake and focused on data engineering, data lake. I'm a big DBT fan. So before I joined Snowflake, I was using it professionally. And then now that we're hosting it in Snowflake, I'm super excited. So I'm excited to walk you through today how we operationalize DBT projects like Vino was talking about. And I don't know if you want to do a quick intro.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Uche. I'm the product manager for DBT projects on Snowflake. So I'm really excited to sit by and watch Jeremiah as he shows off some cool technology. Take it away, Jeremiah.
Perfect. So I'm going to go through kind of a combo of some slides, but actually showing you in Snowsight, in Snowflake, these different ideas as I go through them. So let me just quickly show you can everybody see my slides here? I would assume so. Uche, can you see those?
I can.
Okay, perfect. So we're just going to briefly touch on workspaces, and then I'll do an overview of DBT projects, and we'll go through 4 different areas of operations. And what we're going to do along the way, kind of after each spot, is we'll take we'll pause, we'll see if there's questions, and take them kind of as we go throughout. So feel free to ask your questions in the chat, and we're going to get to them. So really briefly, I think it's helpful when we talk about just what DBT project is. I like to start with this diagram. I always break data engineering into 3 phases. You have ingestion, transformation, and consumption. And really, especially for ingestion and transformation, even though we're working with data, we're using different tools, and there's different patterns we're using. And so I separate these. So for ingestion, Snowflake has announced OpenFlow, and this is our managed NiFi data ingestion tool. There's other ways to ingest data in Snowflake, but this is a robust, offering now where you can ingest from any of your sources into your Snowflake into the raw zone in Snowflake. And then for transformation, once you have the data in your raw zone, there's lots of ways you transform it. And so that's where DBT projects fits in. DBT, as probably most of you know, if you're familiar with DBT, it's a transformation tool. It's not an ingestion tool. So it fits in this transformation kind of bucket. And that's how we transform it, and then can be consumed by various users. So just putting it kind of in perspective in your mind where this fits in the kind of Snowflake data engineering ecosystem. DBT projects are awesome. Like I mentioned, I love the DBT tool. And now that we run it inside of Snowflake, what we're doing here, and I'll show you this, is we're actually running DBT core and in the future Fusion inside of Snowflake. So you don't need to have a lot of customers when they're running DBT core will have will need a separate orchestration tool like Airflow or Prefect or Dagster or something along those lines to actually orchestrate the execution of the DBT command line, where this actually now runs inside of Snowflake. And we have a native object in Snowflake, which I'll show you and describe, which can be governed following Snowflake RBAC. We have observability built into it as well. So you can actually both visually through a dashboard, but also programmatically, you can access logs and see how your DBT projects are running. And then we even have some self-service tools, which I'll talk about here just in a second. So hopefully that kind of gives you the context. This is very exciting for DBT projects. I wanted to the first thing I'll go through, and then we'll take a quick pause, is workspaces. So I'm going to go very quick on this. And the reason I want to mention this is when it comes to our DBT offering, DBT projects offering, there's really two sides to it. There's tools that are development in nature, developer tools in nature. So this is like a web-based IDE where you can actually build, debug, and test your DBT projects. And then the second set of kind of capabilities or features is around the operationalizing side. And that's what we're going to spend most of our time on. But I wanted to mention this because workspaces, if you haven't seen them, are really exciting. And actually, instead of starting with the slide, I'll just start by going to Snowsite here. If you haven't seen this, workspaces is now generally available. It's in under the projects section. And I know that some folks, Snowsite looks different as we're rolling out features, might be arranged slightly differently, but Workspaces is this experience, and it's our new web-based IDE, advanced IDE in Snowsite for editing different Snowflake objects. And the cool thing, if you've been a Snowflake customer for a while, you are likely familiar with worksheets where you could edit SQL scripts. I've been at Snowflake 6 years now, and since I joined, almost since day one, customers have asked me, how can I take those SQL scripts and put them in source control? And we still to this day with worksheets don't have a native integration for that. The other thing was you could really only edit SQL scripts. We do have a Python worksheet option, but generally you were working with SQL scripts and you couldn't edit, if it was a config file, like a YAML config file or others, right in that same editor. Workspaces, think about it as an upgrade to our worksheets. On the left here, the workspace manages any number of files. You can edit any file within the editor here. So if we look at like a DBT project file, like the DBT project YAML, I can edit YAML files in here. I can edit and run SQL scripts in here. So I can have some SQL scripts, edit and run those directly. And all of these files can be backed by source control. So you can see at the top, I've got this changes tab. I can actually now see visually a diff between the changes. I can check them into source control, change branches, all of that. So this is very powerful. And we've got then built-in features for DBT. And again, today I'm not going to focus on this because this is more of the developer debugging experience. But for those users that want to use Snowsite, you can actually, right from the top here, you can actually run DBT inside of Snowflake interactively. You can actually look at the DAG, so the directed acyclic graph. This shows you the relationship between the models in DBT. And I can see all of those models and how they relate. I can click on the model and open it up, etc. So a lot of really important features here that help you from a building and debugging perspective. And then, like I mentioned, this is going back to this slide really quick. What's important here is that workspace that has all those files can be backed by a Git repo. And this allows you to use whatever editor you want. So this is a question customers ask me a lot is, some teams will use VS Code or other editors to build their DBT projects, and you can continue to do that. So you can have the shared Git repo that you could have some users working from VS Code against and some from workspaces against. And that can be the same DBT project. So the whole workspaces experience is an option, but it's not the only way you can build your DBT projects. Okay, so that was a lot. I went kind of quick through the workspaces. I wanted to make sure we covered that because if you haven't seen it, you should definitely start using it for a lot of other purposes besides DBT projects as well. But Uche, Vino, any questions around that in particular or comments?
Okay, I see that. Firstly, for folks tuning in, if you have any questions, please put it in the comments. So we would have Jeremiah and Uche answering it for you. But there's this one question that I do have is that we've been using DBT projects for a while now. Say I'm an existing data engineer who's already using Snowflake. What is something in terms of like testing capabilities that I should know? How do I test my DBT projects? And I think Nasri also has a very similar question in terms of, does DBT in Snowflake provide all features and testing capabilities compared to the DBT core? Like, where does it get?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. So this is actually one of the things that I particularly love about DBT. Like when I explain, this is from my perspective, but when I explain to customers what DBT, what makes it special, one of those top things is the testing framework that it has built in. So we support, the short answer is that everything that's supported in DBT core is supported in DBT projects in Snowflake. And that includes the testing. So in this test project that I have here, we've got it, and I'm not going to spend time today to go into DBT testing and how it works, but you can have the different types of tests in DBT. So you can have these.
Are you presenting?
Yeah. Are you seeing my?
Now we are.
Okay, good. Thank you. Please let me know if it's behind for some reason.
Mhm.
So this, when you look at this really quick, this is an example of a test in DBT where you can write your own SQL query tests. There's all kinds of different ways to do testing in DBT, whether it's also through, within the actual configuration files for your models, you can add tests as well. So there's like data tests and different ways to do this. Again, I'm not going to dive deep here, but absolutely, like this is one of the benefits of DBT is the ability to do testing and have it tied to your models and related to them. And that's all available here. And I'll show at the end when we get into the automation and the DevOps side of it, how you could run this as part of a pipeline.
Yeah, and to add on, in case you're wondering, we do support DBT depths inside of workspaces, as well as it will be supported inside of DBT project objects. And so that means that if you go ahead and use any of the DBT packages found on DBT Package Hub, like DBT expectations, which is a really common framework, that will work, and that will allow you to write any sort of tests that those really awesome DBT utils are able to run. So just to add on, we do support depth, so that expands just the built-in regular DBT functionality as well.
Awesome. And there's one more question from Joel Fernandez, who asks if we can download the projects locally from Snowflake. Can I download DBT projects from Snowflake in my own local?
Yeah, so here's the way I would suggest, and going back to this slide, when you create your workspace in Snowflake, you have two options. So I'll go back here to Snowsite. I have a bunch of workspaces here. When I create a new one, I can create a new workspace. This first option is where Snowflake will manage the files. So the files will live inside of Snowflake essentially. But I would suggest looking at this from Git repository option, because what that will do is what I have shown here is create the workspace that's mapped to your Git repo. So every file in here you edit, when you go into the changes tab and you push those changes, you're actually pushing them into your remote Git repo. And so then it's shared across all of your users and tools and everything. So that's where I would focus. That's going to be the most kind of robust, best practice way to do it.
Yep, that's fantastic. And talking about best practices, I feel like this question maybe doesn't have like one right or wrong answer, but based on your interactions with the customers, if you could help answer. Vivek Naik has a question that they have multiple data marts in Snowflake, and how can he work with DBT projects? Do you create multiple DBT projects, like one for each data mart, or do you combine them for like one DBT project that caters to multiple teams or multiple use cases downstreams? How should one think about really organizing these projects?
Yeah, it's a good question. We could spend a long time on it. I'm going to kind of give you the consulting answer, but it depends is the answer. There's, this gets into a bigger question around kind of managing, like you asked about one or more DBT projects. There's various ways to do it. My general advice to customers is start simple. Start with one project, build it out until you hit some sort of a friction point, and then think about splitting. This is kind of true in a lot of areas of software development. Don't over-engineer to start. I wouldn't start by creating a project for each data mart. I would keep them in one to start, and then kind of do it as needed. So that's just general advice, but that has served me well over the years.
No, I think that's helpful.
And so I think some of these different questions may be answered as we move forward. So maybe do you want to jump back in, and then we just as we walk through, we'll probably have a few more.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, we do have to keep moving through. So that's great. All right. So what I want to do, again, this was focused on workspaces, which is the development, environment or development tooling. But what I really want to explain now is what we've built in Snowflake. So let me just show you here. We're going to go to the data tab in Snowflake. This is in Snowsite. And I'm going to show you, if I scroll down, I have this Tasty Bites database. Okay, can everybody, let me just zoom in one more time, make sure you can see this. You're probably familiar with really any data platform provides a way to browse the objects. Within the database and schema, you see different object types. So you're all familiar with tables and views and tasks and all those things. There's actually a new object type in Snowflake now called a DBT project. This is really important. This is a native object inside of Snowflake, just like a table and a view and a task. And if I expand this and show you the object, just like any other object, we have a tab here that shows the definition, permissions, all those things. So this, you can see some SQL syntax for how this particular one was created. And we have, just like every object in Snowflake, we support DDL and SQL to manage the lifecycle. So you've got, in this case, create DBT project, some name, foo, and then this from location. And I'll talk about this in just a second.
And right here, want to mention, especially for our folks that love DBT docs as an experience, in the future, on this page, you'll be actually able to see an interactive DAG that overlays your project details page. And this will also support a picker where you can actually select between all of your models, all of your sources, your tests. So that way it's basically putting our version of a Snowflake productized DBT docs experience inside of Snowsite. But if you're a team that actually wants to use DBT docs itself, you'll also be able to specifically run DBT docs generate, including DBT docs generate -- static on your project object. And then you can download, there we go, can you generate DBT docs? Then you'll be able to actually download that build artifact and then use it in any way you want. So that build artifact that you download will actually just specifically have the catalog JSON and the index HTML. It'll have the files you need if that's still what you want to do. But in order to be able to control our own UI destiny, we made sure that you're going to have an in-product experience to browse your models, browse your tests, et cetera, and also look at the DAG of a DBT project object. So that's coming for GA.
Nice. Yeah, thank you, Uche. That's great. That is something that customers ask me a lot as well. So thank you for covering it preemptively. So this is our object in Snowflake. As a native object, there's RBAC. So we have Snowflake permissions you can assign to this as well. And I'll talk more about this other aspects. But first point, there's a native object in Snowflake called a DBT project. And I'll show you a couple slides to just help explain how this works, because we need to get, as we talk about operations here, we need to get into you have to learn a couple core things about how it works so that you can then do the operational side. So here in the next slides, I'm going to show if there's a diagram of a folder with a little DBT projects icon. What this represents is a DBT project. So a folder of files that's a DBT core. This is just a standard DBT core project. And all of these files are things, I'm not going to explain DBT projects today, but this is your standard DBT project, your config files, your standard folders, and all that. So when you see this icon, that represents the whole project. And this object that I mentioned, this DBT project object, what we do in the side of this thing is we keep versions, a version history of the project as you deploy them. So when you first create it, we have version 1. And as you deploy new versions, as you run an alter DBT projects, what it's doing actually is creating another version of those files that make up the project inside of that object. So essentially this DBT project object in Snowflake is a file container at its core that keeps track of different versions of the project files over time. And then I'll show you the other aspects, then you can run and do the rest of the operations of it. But that's really core. Like you have to you'll see this as I keep going, we're going to build on this, but that's a really core principle to get at first. Okay, so that's what the object looks like. Like I mentioned, we're going to run through, 4 pieces here: how to run, monitor, orchestrate, and deploy these DBT projects. So the way I'll show you this is we'll kind of cover some of the orchestration bits. If you've used tasks before in Snowflake, a task is our orchestration feature in Snowflake. So I mentioned some external, some third-party open source orchestration tools like Airflow earlier. Tasks is the Snowflake native orchestration tool. And we'll talk more about orchestration, which, you have a choice. That's the key message as a customer. You can orchestrate these DBT projects through whatever tool you want. I just wanted to show you here using the Snowflake native tasks feature, what it looks like. So if you're familiar with Snowflake tasks, you define the DDL to define it is create task. You specify some attributes like warehouse and the schedule. But the core part of the definition of a task in Snowflake is which SQL command to execute. And here you can actually see how we execute a DBT project. And there's, again, a SQL DML command. So execute DBT project, project name, and then the arguments are the arguments you would specify on the command line if you were running DBT core. So everything, and we just pass them through. So all of most customers I work with that are building DBT projects, when you're scheduling them, you're targeting certain sets of models to run. So you're using the selector framework and -- select to identify models. All of that is possible here. I've just kept this really simple with running all the models, but you can be very targeted.
I also wanted to throw in, not only is that -- select supported, folks do ask about using the plus notation. And if you're not familiar, it's on the DBT Docs website, but you could also say -- select model plus. And so that would then say from this model, run everything downstream. So that's an important aspect. You could also say -- select plus model, which says run everything upstream from this model until up to and including this model. So that's pretty important because a lot of folks say, well, I want to run from the specific model that failed. Well, that's exactly what you would do is from the model that failed plus, and that way you can run downstream. And then if you go back to the DBT projects object, kind of dovetailing from what you were mentioning here, in the future on this page, we will allow you to actually execute the DBT project object as a one-off execution here with like an execute button, as well as create and view your schedules from this page. So that way you can create your schedule, which is pretty simply just that task definition that Jeremiah just showed. But you'll, of course, be able to put in whatever flags you want, including -- select, -- target. And then you'll be able to also view your schedules, meaning view any of the tasks that specifically are executing this DBT project object from this same page. That gives you sort of a all-in-one feel while on this page, which gives you what you need. You're looking at a mixture of DBT docs information, which is your DAG related information, while you can also do a one-off execution, which sometimes helps with retry scenarios, and lastly, that view and create schedule scenario.
Perfect. Yeah, it's fun, Uche, to have you on the call because I'm even learning some things here that I wasn't aware we were working on. So it's exciting for everybody. This is really cool stuff coming. All right, we're gonna actually, while I'm on this topic, we'll cover orchestration right now since it's very related. So like I mentioned, you run execute DBT project. This is using tasks in Snowflake, but you don't have to use tasks. So when it comes to orchestration, this is a bigger conversation that I'll have with customers and walk through. It depends on a number of factors, but whatever the point is, whichever orchestration tool you pick, the approach is very similar. You can connect to Snowflake. So if you're using Airflow, for example, you can connect to Snowflake and you can run this command, execute DBT projects. I'll show you in a little bit. We're going to talk about the DevOps side and I'll talk about the Snowflake CLI. You can actually also call execute DBT project through the Snowflake CLI, but it's just doing the exact same thing. It's just essentially a wrapper around execute DBT project. So this is what you need to understand is you're essentially going to be calling execute DBT project from whatever orchestration tool you pick. So that's really that discussion on orchestration is pretty quick. That's really the short and skinny of it. And like Uche said, there's different ways to run the models, and that becomes definitely a bigger discussion as well around how do you divide up your models. DBT, additionally, you can tag models and run them as groups with tags and all kinds of stuff. So all of that becomes and then often jobs are run on different frequencies. Some are run, maybe every 5 minutes, some every hour, some every day. So you group your models into different sets and you run them on different schedules and all of that. That's kind of traditional or standard DBT orchestration. And all of that is supported with how we've implemented this. So, okay, really quick, if there's like maybe a good question to cover on the running and orchestrating DBT projects, I'll take it now. And then we'll move on to the monitoring part. But maybe just one if there's a good one.
So far, most of these are questions around workspaces, et cetera, which I think we can probably save till the end.
Okay. Let's go on to the next part. We got a couple, we're building now to the, it depends on who, around the call here, but the focus is on operationalizing. I'm sure a lot of you want to know about DevOps and that side. So we're building now to that. So there's a couple more concepts I have to explain to you that will be building blocks for then getting to the final automation through a CI/CD pipeline. The next one is about, before that, we're going to just quickly touch on monitoring. I mentioned that Snowflake has built into, as part of the solution, observability and monitoring. There's a bunch of things that happen. So now in the monitoring tab, if you look at this part in Snowsight, there's you're probably familiar with query history, been around since the beginning, still one of my favorite places in Snowsight to go. Dynamic tables, tasks, copy, all those things. We now have a DBT projects history. And this lets you view across your whole account, all of your DBT projects and the execution history. And it gives you a summary of the last 7 runs, the last number of runs and how many fails and successes you had, all of that. So you can quickly identify the jobs that are failing. I can drill, this is account wide. By clicking on a particular DBT project, I can drill into that particular one. And you can see now we're back in that data view where I'm looking at that same object we were looking at earlier. And now I'm seeing the run history. And I can look at the individual run history. I can drill into a particular run. And you get a ton of details about this execution. So this was, again, if you look at the SQL text, it was execute DBT project, like I just explained. But we show even visually here a quick breakdown of all the models that ran and the execution time. So you can visually see where the bottlenecks are. We show the DBT output. So this is your standard DBT output that's all captured here as part of this execution.
And something I want to add here is this is exact. And so right here in this page, a huge help that folks mention is that they want to spot the bottleneck. So if you scroll up just a second, right to that, to this models thing, if someone's wondering like, why did my DBT run take so long? You can literally just see it was orders. It's super helpful for spotting bottlenecks and understanding that, oh, that one took 4 minutes. Everything else was much shorter. And then something that's coming in the future, that's coming by GA, would be, if you scroll down, when you have an error, we will be putting the DBT log output inside of this output. So this will really help tie together that sort of observability of, hey, this thing failed. What are the log messages I need to care about? What is the output? And we'll be giving you that as well. We know that that's a current known limitation. Oh, and lastly, this exact output circle you see right here is exactly where you'll be able to download your build artifacts. So from this specific command, whatever build artifacts were generated for that command, you'll be able to specifically download that target folder and then do whatever you want with it, including use the manifest.json or upload it to a third-party service. Any of those things are possible.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and on that last note about the artifacts, that we also have a way to do it programmatically as well. So you'll have different ways. Everything that I show you in Snowsight, you can do programmatically in Snowflake. That's one of the things I've always loved about Snowflake is that you can then, because you can do it generally through SQL, it's easy to create automations on top of Snowflake. So yeah, so in addition to those, last comment is our open telemetry support. So if you're not familiar also with Snowflake event tables, something that I would put on your short list of things to learn about. This has been added in Snowflake now for a while, but we've pretty much at this point have all of the Snowflake services writing into and hooked up to the event table. And this is what we do in the event table is we store logs and traces in the open telemetry format. And we've done the same with DBT projects. So we've integrated it into the event table, and we've done it with logs and traces. And these are, I'm not going to get into the deep dive of this, but traces are a specific type of event that you can do in open telemetry. And when either custom code or our Snowflake features log these different events, you get this, we create this visual view for you. And so this is similar to the last view, except for it gives you more detail around each step, but you can still see in here each model execution with some additional detail about it. And you can see same kind of thing, which one took longer to run. So here we can see that it was that orders model. But I can also now drill into that particular event and see span info, related metrics, logs, etc. So just all kinds of detail. And everything, like I mentioned, is available. This is in the event table in Snowflake. So you can query it and do other integrations and automations on top of it. You could integrate with other monitoring tools. You could create your alerts of your own. Any kind of automation you want to do is a possibility because of how we built this. Okay, let's quickly, I want to spend the last bit of time here talking about the deploying of DBT projects. So there's 2 slides or 3 slides I want to go through really quick to explain. I talked about the DBT project object already, and I mentioned that this essentially is a container, a file container, and we store versions of your DBT project object over time. And there's 2 ways. There's 2 SQL DDL commands, and these are just standard, DDL commands. But there's create object, so create DBT project, and then there's a alter DBT project, and then you specify the keywords add version. And what this does when you run these commands is it takes a copy of all the files that are specified in this from clause. So both commands have a from clause, and it takes a copy of all of those files and puts it into the DBT project object. And the source for those files, you have 4 options. You can go from an internal stage, from a Git repository stage, from a workspace, or from another DBT project object. And all it's doing, this gives you options. At the end of the day, all it's doing is creating a copy of all those files that are specified into your object. And then when you execute it using execute DBT project, it runs that version of the project. But this is how you would deploy over time. That's what you're going to do, right? You're going to have a version of this DBT project object for dev, test, and prod. You're going to deploy updates to it. You're going to run those updates to make sure they work right. And then as you go through the pipeline, ultimately to prod. The last piece I want to cover is the Snowflake CLI. This is really important. If you haven't used it before, this is our, it's been around for a while now. At the moment, we have 2 command line tools, SnowSQL, which has been around for a long, long time. And you use the keyword SnowSQL, all one word, to run that. And we now have the Snowflake CLI command line, which is you run by just the keyword snow. And for the moment, it's confusing because we have 2. We are the plan, and we're getting really close, is to have the Snowflake CLI tool be the single tool, and we'll eventually deprecate the Snowflake SQL command. Command line is a separate tool. We'll have all that functionality in Snowflake CLI. So this is where I would start. If you're not using either, start here. But this lets you manage the object lifecycle of a ton of things. And I'm not going to cover all of this today. You can see on the screen here. But DBT projects is one of those. And that we can actually do, there's a lot of commands built in here to help us make this deployment process easier. And particularly, there's a command called snow. So snow is the command line tool. The next keyword DBT specifies that you want to run some commands related to DBT projects. And the third argument is the command to run. So snow dbt deploy will actually deploy a DBT project. And it does a number of steps for you. You could do all of these yourself, but the power of this tool is it does it for you. And I have a visual. I won't read through this text here, but I'll show you the visual. When you run this, generally you're going to want to run this from your CI/CD agent, so that you're doing your builds and deployments through a CI/CD tool like GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps or any of the other great tools, Jenkins, others. What happens is this local file system would represent that agent, the CI/CD agent, the runner. what you're going to do is that you'll have a copy of your DBT project there. You'll run DBT, Snow DBT deploy. And what it does is it actually copies all of those files into an internal stage. It creates a temporary stage, copies them into the stage, and then it will run, depending on the state of your Snowflake account, it'll run either a create DBT project or an alter. And then with those files from the temporary stage, which then will create another copy of those into the object. So we actually have two copies of the files happening here. First one is temporary, so it'll be thrown away when it's done, but the second one is persisted in the object. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. And all of this is done by the CLI for you. And this makes it really easy.
And so I want to, and is that your final slide actually?
Yep, that's the final
great
slide.
Job. So I wanted to make sure I touch on something, and then we have a good amount of time for questions. I'm seeing some questions that are probably pretty great to answer, but get a lot of questions about DBT depths and the compilation of a when deploying a DBT project object. So what's important to understand is our current known limitation for our current PUPR is that when you deploy your DBT project object, you always have to include the DBT packages folders, basically your DBT depths, inside of your Git repository in order to successfully create the DBT project object. However, in the future, and by future, I mean by GA, you will be able to actually use -- external access integrations in your Snowflake CLI command, snow dbt deploy -- external access integrations, and specify an external access integration, which tells us in our backend to run DBT depths before we crystallize and create that version, that new version. So this allows you to no longer have to, because we know a lot of folks ignore their DBT packages folders. So this should help streamline that deployment process. Another aspect is what we're calling base compile. So every time you deploy, not only can you say, hey, my external access integration, make sure you run DBT depths, but always by default, we will run a compile at the end as well. That way you get all of your up-to-date manifest files. So that way, when you go to snowflake.com or Snowsite, sorry, you'll be able to see your most up-to-date DAG, your most up-to-date model information, etc. So we're calling that base depths and compile, but it's the way that you can make sure that you're following your own code best practices of using git ignore on DBT packages while also still getting all of the things that you're looking for inside of the DBT project object.
Yeah, and one just super quick comment on that. So we've built, one of the things I was excited about with this, how we built this out, is we've built this DBT projects feature in a way that you can follow really any of the ways the best practices that we had before around DBT deployments. So in this case, like Uche mentioned, we're working on adding some more functionality around the DBT depths kind of in Snowflake. But what you can do for now, which has been the best practice for forever, and probably really still is in your CI/CD pipeline in the agent, which I'm representing over here in this, where it says local file system, it's one of the steps that you do. So you check out your repo, you run DBT depths, you download them, and then when you run the Snow CLI or Snow DBT deploy command, it'll take all those files, including the depths, copy them into the stage, copy them into the object, and deploy them. So all those steps, the way we've generally done that is just in your deployment pipeline in that agent, you run those different commands, and then those get packaged up and deployed. Mm-hmm. And so that's still the best practice. I would start there for sure, and then as we have features that make it easier, it might open up different possibilities. But that really is the way that you would deploy to any other tool, whether it was Airflow or anything else, and that's the way you'd want to do it here as well.
Exactly. It's just a great option in case you need it. But like you said, best practice is run DBT depths inside of the runner or the CI/CD tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Don't. Sorry. One real quick thing. Don't check them into your Git repo. This is like depending on how you try to do this, you might be tempted to do that, but you don't want those versioned dependency files to be in your Git repo. Those are something that it's more of a deployment time thing. So don't check them in.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeremiah and Uche. I'm sure this was a very insightful session for most of us. And I do see there is about 5-6 questions, and I don't think we will be able to get to all of them. And one important thing, Uche, as you were talking about, some of the features that would come in the future, you did say that in the future, you mean GA, but do you have any timelines about when that might be? Don't worry, we won't hold you to it, but sort of like a timeline would be very helpful.
The hottest question in the world. I'm just kidding. No, yeah. So our backend team has actually implemented all of the functionality I've shown today, and we're targeting GA for mid to late October. So it's actually coming in about a month, which is like pretty soon. And so all of the things that I mentioned as future stuff is coming by GA, and it'll show up in your Snowsite account. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. And I will probably wrap it up with one last question. And I guess I see two of them. Shubham really asking, how do we manage the semantic models in these DBT projects?
That's a good question. Did you want to say, go ahead, Jeremiah, if you have something?
Well, I assume she's asking specifically about DBT, the feature that DBT offers, being the semantic models. Is that what she's asking about?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, and then maybe one thing we haven't talked about, which is probably worth mentioning, is, DBT. We're running DBT core inside of Snowflake. DBT is an awesome Snowflake partner, and DBT offers a feature, a product called DBT Platform, formerly known as DBT Cloud. And it has a lot of great features, some of which we don't provide inside of Snowflake. So DBT Mesh is one, the semantic models, there's other features as well. And so those are definitely features that are provided by them that have a place. And so I really, this is another kind of consulting answer, but it really depends on what you're doing with them. And we don't support the DBT semantic layer within Snowflake like they do in DBT Platform. So if that's something that's important to you and you're using, you might still consider using DBT Platform for that. But I just want to throw that out, like that comes up a lot as a question. And like I said, DBT is a great partner, and they have more advanced features than what we offer.
For sure. And small thing is that, yeah, it's like Jeremiah mentioned, these are things that are offered by the DBT platform. If you wanted to use Snowflake semantic views, this is something that can be done in a post hook. Say after you've run your full transformation, you run a post hook in DBT core, which then allows you to create, various tables, but it's not something that's an integrated experience. Yeah, and then we do have one question about defer that I wanted to touch on. I know that we're almost at time. Nasri asked a question about talking about defer. That's a pretty great question. We've heard it all the time. So a lot of folks want to run using -- defer or with various deferred states. This will be possible by GA, and it will be something where we're using a nested stage inside of the DBT project object that will be accessible. So you'll be actually able to use deferred states when you're doing executions, whether it be in workspaces or, of course, in a DBT project object. So it's not something you have to consider your own external storage. That'll be something that is available in Snowflake. I get plenty of questions about that.
Perfect. Yeah, that one comes up a lot.
Awesome. Wow. Okay, that was a lot of questions. Thanks, folks. And I do see that there are a few more questions that aren't answered, and I'm sure Uche or Jeremiah will get to those in the comment section. And with that
said, my screen here. Sorry, really quick. Can you guys still see the screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention a couple of resources that I have a blog post that goes deep into all these topics and gives you more details than I covered. And that's here. We'll share the links as well, but we also have a tutorial that you can do to get started with DBT projects. I would recommend you go through this. Getting your hands on it will be the quickest way to learn it. Mm-hmm. And then Uche also has a blog post on Medium about GitHub Actions and that CI/CD part as well. So you have 3 great resources that you should leverage if you're getting into this.
Yes, thanks, Jeremiah, for flagging them. I think the links to the blog and the tutorial are all in the comments as well for folks to check out. And please do get your hands on it, build with it, and share the feedback with us. We'll be more than happy to hear from you. And that's it. Thanks a ton, Jeremiah and Uche. This was a very insightful session, and I guess very engaging too. A lot of very interesting questions from folks. That's very super useful for all of us here. And thanks again.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks
folks.
everybody.
See you next
Anytime.